So good. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fittest. I'm so excited to have IFBB Pro Autumn Cleveland here with me today. How are you doing, girl?
Good. Thank you for having me on again.
Yeah, it was such a great interview last time, and you've had so much going on. I've really been cued into a lot of the posing stuff that you've been posting on social media. You've created this huge platform with it. I really enjoy some of the videos. Like I've gotten kicks out of like the joking about the things that you see on stage because we've all seen them. And
Oh,
yeah, so the humor that comes with that is really great also. But you just are like doing a whole thing, and it's just become this people need to get on board with this. Like you are helping so many people, and I just love that.
Thank you. That's my goal, is to save competitors the time and trouble that I had to go through to learn these things, just get them there faster.
Yeah. Well, it's been mentioned so many times, and even on the last podcast, Brooke and I touched on it briefly, and I told her, I said, well, I'm gonna have Autumn on, and we're just gonna like posing, like go over it all. But it is like the number one overlooked thing, is it not, for competitors?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So like I think this every single day, but like any other sport, it's very physical performance based. Like you watch a football game, that's trained performance and skill. Bodybuilding is no different. It's just like we have different categories of where that training and skill goes into, like the actual lifts, the nutrition, but the posing is our performance and it is the game. So to not learn the skills to me is ridiculous, because what other sport can you get away with that you're not owning your skills?
So beautifully said. I remember a quote that John Jewett said like probably 5 years ago, where he was like, on show day, you will not do cardio, squat, or bench. You need to learn how to, I'm butchering this, but he's like, all you'll do is present,
Yes.
So you need to perfect your craft, which is the presentation of all the work that you did, because nobody cares how much work you put into it. It's what's presented on the stage that they're judging.
Yeah. And that's like, for me personally, I always feel comfortable on show day, because it doesn't matter how bad I physically feel. The Olympia was an exact example. I felt physically horrible, but I was so glad that I practiced my posing to death, because that was the only variable that I could actually control at that point. And it's like, you can't control what you're going to wake up looking like. I mean, you can try, like, hopefully you and your coach have got it pretty close. But if you have a stressful event, or something happens and you get sick or whatever, it's like, you can't always control every single variable. You can't control who shows up, but you can control your posing and how you adapt on stage. And that's what I want to teach people, is it's like, you can 100% control your posing all the time.
Yeah. And it makes such a huge difference. Posing makes such a huge difference with just, it can make a difference with placement or whatever, just because it's the look, it's either the audience or the judges are getting joy from what they're seeing, or they're like, what's happening here?
Right. And what a frustrating thing. And I know, because I've been on the end of this. I can't tell you how many times over the years that I think I've hit my posing, and then I look back at the pictures, or a judge says like, you just weren't hitting your pose. And that's so frustrating to hear, because I can say like, oh yeah, my physique was better, but could I display that to them? Nope, because I didn't nail my posing. And that sucks. It sucks to hear, and it's hard for judges to say, but they have to say it if that's the case, because that's the answer. But like, it's frustrating for everybody. And I've been a part of this, and I've seen it too, where judges will call rounds and rounds and rounds of quarter turns, because sometimes the potential winner hits their poses and then sometimes they don't. And they try to be fair, but the judges can only do so much. So it's like up to us as athletes to do the rest, like do our job. But they get frustrated too when they see like, you could have won, but you just didn't hit your poses.
Yeah, they just can't see it. They can see the potential, but it's just like, it's just not there. That's
Right.
so, yeah. And we all know it. We've all seen beautiful physiques presented oddly,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that one of the biggest things is that you probably recommend that people record themselves because I mean, I think about this even when, like, even if you're filming your workouts and you're just like, oh, that was like brutal, like whatever. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, I totally had more in me that I could have done, or, oh, I wasn't getting as, stretched as I thought I was getting when I was doing my RDL or whatever
Right.
it is. Like what you feel isn't necessarily what is being seen.
Yes, especially on stage because your movements need to be more dramatic.
Yes. So, Autumn, I want to quickly talk a little bit about what got you into this sport because I know you've been in it a long time. I know you have a great YouTube video that is a documentary of it all, and I want to recommend people check that out if they haven't checked it out. But can you just kind of like what got you into the sport?
The simplified version of my backstory is I just grew up very thin, like genetically, I was really thin, and I ended up switching middle schools. And the one that we switched to was very small in quantity and small minded. And I started to get bullied by these girls that were like a grade above me. And it got to the point where I didn't feel like I could, like, I felt weak, and I was like, if they like gang up on me, I'm not going to be able to defend myself. Like that's kind of how it started. But I was also dealing with some body image issues and just feeling, I don't know, I didn't really feel great about how I looked either. And so I asked my dad, who was a police officer at the time, because he always took me to the gym when I was like really little. And I was like, hey, I was like, I think I need to get stronger. And so he started getting me to the gym, just out of like high school survival stuff. And then I met a female bodybuilder there, and I ended up going to like watch one of her shows. And after I watched it, I was like, I think I might be able to do something like that. And so she kind of helped me like get the essentials down. But I was like, I think I just turned 16 years old, and I had like a ridiculous metabolism. So to be honest, I didn't know what a diet was back then. I could eat whatever and step on stage and it worked. Not the case now. So that was my first experience of competing around 2004. I just wanted to see if I could do it, but also like the more I broke away from school, the happier I was. And this was a sport that didn't involve school. So I wanted to spend my time there because I just hated being at school so much. And then I just kind of felt that was like my safe zone. That was like the world that I could live in where I felt good and like I belonged there, and that nobody could touch me there or put me down. Uh, it's funny saying that now because I was like trying to escape judgment from school, and then I choose a sport that you are actually asking to be judged. So that's how I view the judges in this whole sport. It's like I trust them to judge me appropriately and fairly, whereas I didn't trust people around me in a social setting to judge me fairly. They would just judge me anyway. So that's where I got started in the sport. And then, okay, so that was like 2004. It took me like 15 years to get my pro card. So that happened in 2018. And then I competed as a pro for 4 years. Is that true? Yeah, I guess 4 years before I actually like made it to the Olympia. It's been a long route.
It's been an arduous journey. It's very interesting to me. You have, I mean, somebody like you, somebody like Brooke, there's, some of the other girls who have been doing this for 15, 20 years. Juliana, competed
Yeah,
for 10 years before she actually got, high up there. So it's like, does it bother you when you see now, do you think women now, get their pro card more easily because there's probably a variety of variables. There's more pro cards available. There's more shows. Do you think it's because they have access to more information so they make less mistakes? Or do you think
absolutely.
rushing things? What is your thoughts on that?
I think it's a lot of variables, but number one, we have more education and resources available now than ever. And I mean, back when I first started, if you wanted to know something, you had to know someone at the gym to get that information, or try to read a muscular development magazine and try to pick up something from there. And that was it. There was no I don't even remember forums, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I never came across them, but 20 years ago, it was very difficult to even find accurate information. But the other thing too is, as a woman, I remember battling this up through my early 20s. And now it's the cool thing to do. So you're in an environment where you're going to flourish a lot easier and faster because it's empowered now, whereas even 10 years ago there was a lot of resistance. So
Yes.
it's like you had to really want to compete if you wanted to step outside that box, because you were going to get a lot of backlash from men or women, and the path of resistance is always harder. So it's like there's environmental and social aspects of that, but I mainly think it's the information and then the resources and opportunities that are available too, because like there's a ton of shows now, there's a ton of posing clinics now, there are a lot of incredible coaches. So I almost say this every podcast I'm on. I hope people understand how lucky they are to be growing into bodybuilding it now, as opposed to 20 years ago. And I'm sure the people who were before me, 30 and 50 years ago, would be saying the same thing to me. It's just, yeah, that's how I can sum it up, I think. But there's other variables in that too.
Yeah. Do you, okay, so I think about that even 10 years ago, because with the birth of like Instagram, anybody that was a female involved in bodybuilding, I mean, I would get comments about how I'm disgusting and gross when I was,
Oh yeah.
and I was just like, I mean, people don't have the balls to say that now because we are our own, you know what I mean? Like the trolls are really, you just kind of go, you don't even know what this sport is. Like you have no idea what this is.
No.
I wanted to say that, about the environment and people judging you. So it's really, what was I going to say? Oh, I kind of lost my
You sound like me.
I totally lost my train of thought. Let me go back to environment in a minute, because I want to ask you this. How important do you think it is to find a group? And let's say you can't control your own home personal environment, like you couldn't control this environment at school of these kids picking on you. And I know a lot of people who, maybe they don't have a supportive spouse, or their family is like, what the frick are you getting into? Like, this is awful. Even like, oh, I know I was gonna say, even people judge us on social media as like, it's just a beauty pageant. Like it's so vain of you to want to do this. They don't understand what the characteristics of bodybuilding really is. And it really has nothing to do with wanting to be beautiful or aesthetic, right?
Right.
So speak.
Well, specifically on which part of that? Like, there's a lot of rabbit holes I could go down.
Yeah, go wherever you want to go with that. I think about being judged and how important is your environment to thrive. Like,
Well, the environment piece is crucial, but yes, there are some things you can control and some you can't. I consider myself lucky to have a supportive environment, but also I've eliminated a lot from my environment, specifically people. And if someone can't simply respect me, they don't exist to me. Now, I have my days on social medias where I'm a saucy person. Sometimes it's fun for me to respond. Most of the time I don't. Like just like an hour ago, some guy who didn't know what he was talking about said something about my dreadlocks. And I was like, I don't give a shit if you like my hair or not. I'm not for you. And there's things I could have said that I don't like about him, but I don't, because I'm not that kind of person. Like, we're different people. And as soon as I acknowledged that, I was like, I'm not even gonna waste my energy on this dude for anything, because he's already disrespected me and I don't care to earn his respect. So just that's an example of just staying in control. This is something I'm trying to practice more, controlling where you decide to put your energy. And there's a lot of people in my life that we can function as acquaintances and in society, but they're not my people. And that's okay, as long as they don't try to become my people and get in my space, because I decide who are my people. That's not a decision that they get to, they don't get to have any part of that. And then with an environment, it's like, I'll use an easy example. There's certain things that I can't trust myself around to not indulge in. And so I just don't bring them in the house. I don't, now I do, I can see the struggle of jobs where people work around other people and like people are bringing food in. So those are like, I almost live vicariously through my clients' struggles sometimes. And I can still understand these scenarios. So I do have a part of me that's like, well, yeah, you can't control everything, but that just means that you need to get firmer in your boundaries. So that I do encourage people to do is when you set a boundary, stand up for yourself. And a boundary doesn't have to be mean or rude. It's just where your stopping point.
Yeah.
And if someone understands and respects that, they'll adapt. And if they can't, why does it matter? They don't matter anymore.
Trying to convince somebody like why you want to live your life a certain way, like you don't have to do that. They don't have to understand you, and they don't get to, then they don't get to be a part of that either.
Right. And like, if we were all sitting in the same room, I don't require an explanation from you. So I don't have to explain myself. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn when I was younger, is that I don't owe the world an explanation. That's really hard to hear and understand, especially with the type of person that I am. I've always felt like I've needed to explain myself. And like now in retrospect, I'm like, oh, I was saying that out loud so I could hear me say it more so than I needed someone else to hear it. And now that I'm older, I'm just kind of like, there's things I don't have to explain. Also, I'm an adult human woman. I'm allowed to change my mind from time to time. So if someone wants an explanation, sometimes I'll ask them why. Why do you want an explanation from me? And if I think it's legit or enough for me to put my energy toward, I might explain myself. And then other times I'm like, I don't have to. And that's tough. So like when you create your environment, that's something I'm more comfortable saying now, but anymore, it's just more draining for me to explain myself than just to simply say no and not follow up with the reason. So even something as simple as saying, this is the truth. This is my genuine truth, but I catch myself saying more and more, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm already at my capacity. And that's not a lie. But I don't have to say anything else.
Yeah.
And capacity for me changes every hour because I have so many passions and so many hobbies, and everything I do is physically and mentally demanding. So sometimes my capacity is extremely low, and all they need to know is I can't take on anymore. I can't commit. So
I think a lot of times simplifying things makes it easier for everyone. Like you said, I think ignoring trolls is just like, a lot of times this is somebody, I think they're even thinking, I wonder if I can get to this girl or I can get a response from her. So they're already getting something if you're giving them that attention. So,
right. Which sometimes it is fun to kind of like mess with them back, but that's very fleeting and rare for me. But sometimes I do like to respond with my smart ass, whatever comment I would say, screenshot it, and then I delete the person anyway, because I'm like, I never want to associate with them again, but I'll use that conversation as something to laugh at. That's my way of like putting the ball back in my court.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Well, what was I going to say about that? I think that there's a lot that you can do to control your environment, and like simplifying things and eliminating distractions. And I really like, even if like, you were going to do something or I like not having to always, or I encourage other people, you don't always have to give a reason why, I mean, I even have it with this podcast. I'd rather not know why you can't do it, for some reason, and just say, you know what, that's not going to work for me. I know we had this plan, but can we reschedule? Because I don't need to judge what your reason is or your excuse.
Right.
Like, and I feel like you're giving too much away that you have to explain to me why. Like, no, just say, you know what, something came up, this isn't going to work this time, can we reschedule? It just simplifies it, and then I don't have to like get upset about whatever it is and just,
yeah, you don't catch yourself wondering, did they just say that to be nice? Like,
right, right. So yeah, I know what I was gonna ask you. Have you been to like therapy or talked about any type of, because this sounds like stuff like I've learned in therapy over the last few years.
so I just went to my first therapy session like 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't about any of my experiences. It's more, I almost want to call it like preventative. There's some things that I am struggling with,
Mhm.
but not in this realm.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to wait until there's a major problem to hit me first. And so I did have my first therapy session like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. Actually, she's more of like an empowerment coach.
Yeah.
So there's some things that like we are acknowledging. She's helping me acknowledge about myself. So really, I guess that's what it is. I want to learn more about myself as opposed to like, especially with like the bullying thing. Bodybuilding has been my therapy. I've found my own ways to deal with it. I probably should have gone to a therapist a long time ago, but I think it worked out okay. Like I think I'm an okay person. So there's like a level now where I feel like I've worked through that part with myself, but then there's other parts of me that just want to be a better human being. That's what I'm more going toward therapy for.
Yeah, that's where I think where I am. Like I worked through a lot of things that I needed to work through, but now it's like I want to know why I do things the way I do. Like,
Yes.
yes, it's a lot of that and like,
Self analysis.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then like the cool thing is when those scenarios present themselves, they're these joyous moments where you're like, oh, past Deb would have done this, but I did this
Yeah.
instead. And it was like, I'm so satisfied with that outcome.
Right. Like
Yeah.
you're equipped before you know. I mean, it's like knowing CPR. Like hopefully you don't have to use it, but if the case presents itself, you know what to do.
Yeah. And it's goes back to what you said too about where you want to focus your energy, because I do like if I learn about why I behave the way I behave, I'm better aware of how I'm behaving, how I'm reacting, and just the energy that I'm putting out towards people and making the world a better place. But I
Right.
it comes back to like a lot of it is really simplifying things, like you said, less explanation, deciding where you're going to put your energy, all of that is it's just maturing. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah. And I'll be 36 this year. I'm an adult. So there's like things that, I mean, I love competing. I'm not going to do it forever. And so I'm like, what do I want to become after bodybuilding? Bodybuilding is my platform now that I love and I'm grateful for, but that's not going to be me forever. And what's the next version of me going to look like? I want to make sure that I'm an intact person. And even if I can't put all of my energy towards something now, I at least want to tune in with it so I can work toward that in the long run. But there's just a lot, especially even with social media. It's like that's one part of me. And at the end of the day, when you're with yourself, you kind of know the things that you don't like that you do or the way that you think or that are damaging. And that's kind of like when you talk about finding true happiness, it's almost like you have to be okay with being really uncomfortable with yourself at first. But then I don't even remember where I heard this the first time. It might have been like a yoga class, but they referred to your future self. And I use that all the time because it's like, I'm not my future self yet, but what's the version of me that I want to become and how can I practice that daily? Am I going to be perfect? No, I'm not supposed to be because I'm not my future self yet, but I can at least assess my actions or my way of thinking to say like, I'm working toward that. And I have days of regression just like everybody else, but like I apply that to bodybuilding, I apply it to business, but I especially apply it to, I want to be an enjoyable experience. When people experience me, I want them to leave being happy that they were with me for a few minutes, not questioning themselves or feeling bad about themselves. And so like the more I learn about me, and like part of the reason I want to go to therapy is like I have no right to diagnose anybody. I'm not a therapist, but it might help me understand someone else or where they're at a little differently And maybe I can provide some words of support or say nothing. And just when I go to interpret them, I understand what's actually going on as opposed to what they're portraying, which
Yeah.
helps me. It helps both of us because I can actually, people have been so mean to me. Local people have been so awful. And once I had the realization that they're not mean to me, they're mean to themselves and they are hurting, that allows me to handle them a little bit more softly because I know I could be someone else and they wouldn't treat me any differently because that's how someone talked to them that way.
Yeah.
And that's what they learned. And so I can't really be mad about that. I just I distinguish that and I'm like, okay, are they trying? Is their intent to hurt me? And if the answer is yes, but if the answer is no, I don't think they were trying to intentionally hurt me, then I just associate this person is hurting, be gentle with them.
Yeah.
And then I just leave it at that. I'm never rude or hurtful back. I just treat them like I would treat a stranger, not someone, how I would treat a friend necessarily, but that helps me.
Yeah, I think, understanding just the analysis of human behavior is fascinating to me too. And it kind of puts you in a place where you're sometimes like sort of outside of what's happening so that you can just look at it and you are better able to, it's almost like you're not in a crisis, you're watching it. And so you can see like where you need to help and what you need to
Yeah.
do, rather than, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of a fire. Like all I can think about is saving me. What do I, what do
Right.
I do to get out or whatever? Like it's less chaos when you understand where people are coming from, why they communicate the way they do. And even just being able to say like, oh, that comment wasn't even about me. Like
Yeah.
like this guy who commented to you about your hair. You're like, you're having a bad day. I'm sorry. I hope it gets better. Like this isn't about
Right.
Red Lux at all.
Yeah. And I try not to, every year I do this thing where I reset with people,
Yes.
even if we've had a really not great interaction.
Yeah.
And so there's people who I interact with frequently, and where they were a year ago is different. And I don't feel right sustaining the same judgment that I had on that phase. Because what if they were going through a really tough time? I've been through a tough time. I'm sure I've said stuff that I regret and I wouldn't say again. And I wish I could go back to somebody and say, hey, I didn't mean that. And I would want forgiveness and a reset. But what I noticed too is even when people don't know I'm doing this. So if each year I reset with that person, they still have the opportunity to change my mind, but a lot of them don't. It's the same then. Year 2 is the same things that I thought about you as year 1. But I've been surprised. I'm glad that I reset with people because I've been surprised the types of friendships and relationships that develop out of that. And I'm glad that we could go there even if our beginning wasn't great.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about with energy. It's wasted energy when you're in a room with somebody and you're like, oh, I don't know if I should look at that person. I don't know what to say. Are they thinking about our last interaction? Because yeah, same thing. I've had people say like, oh, like I heard you were horrible to this person. I probably was. Like,
yeah, I wish I could apologize. If you see
yeah,
them, tell them I would like to talk to them.
that would be ideal. Yeah. Do you have their number? I'm gonna call them a minute and tell them I'm sorry. I would
just leave an apology message. Can you just relay this to them? But like, I wish it could be that easy. Like when I think about the kind of life that I want to live a life of low resistance. The things that I choose to chase are resistant enough. I don't need extra resistance. I don't need more. I can't stand when people do this, when they joke with you and they're like, oh, I'm just giving you a hard time. I'm like, why? Do you think life isn't hard enough? Did you think I needed a hard time? Thank you. You're wrong. Like I don't need more of a hard time. I need you to be easy with me. So that's why I try extra hard to be easy with people. I try to be approachable. I give people the benefit of the doubt. I still have my boundaries, but like I try to be easy to tell the truth to, and I try to be easy to come to in a safe place where people can say things that they want to say to me so that they don't feel like they have to lie or dance around their feelings or say something that they don't actually want to say. I'm a pretty easy human being for the most part. So I just don't understand when people do those things. I'm like, why did you feel like you had to be that way with me? What did I do? That's where I start to internalize. I'm like, what did I do to you that made you feel like you needed to be that way to me? It's just this loop.
This is where the human behavior thing comes into mind, because it's like, it's the people that love you, right? It's like, I don't need that from my safe people. I get it enough from, people who don't know me are questioning what I'm doing, so it's like, you gotta be like, it's a privilege for you to be in my circle, in my safe space.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, relish that. Come on.
Yeah. And I encourage people to do that. Like the more that I am able to give to like my goals, the more important I realize that is. And that's what I encourage my clients to do too. Like just protecting, getting your zone set up and then just protecting it. And hopefully having people around that are willing to protect that too.
Do you think that a lot of women get into bodybuilding for reasons like yourself, because they're feeling broken or lost or not strong? And do you think that, like, do you think bodybuilding, how much do you think that helps? And it's like the solution? And like, what would you have done? Would you have done something differently? Like maybe you would have gone to therapy sooner? Because I feel like I see this a lot with women, and part of me being on the way out of like more in the retirement of bodybuilding, I feel like it served its purpose and I learned so much. But I also think I wouldn't want somebody to not utilize the other elements of life in order to grow and just be like, bodybuilding saved me, and be totally like on just that path of bodybuilding, and like you're opening up your world to all different elements that can help you. That was a lot, but do you think there are
Yeah, it was a lot, but it's good.
I'm noticing this trend more and more as I interview you and as I get clients who come in, and a lot of it is like almost like a crisis, and they're like, I want to do a show because in one way or another their life is falling apart.
I have actually I think my brain is going two different sides of this because like,
Oh,
if I hadn't chose bodybuilding, I would have been extremely destructive. I was in a destructive place. And bodybuilding is still destructive. It's just you recover from it. And in being destructive, you grow, you rebuild. And I can definitely say that if I didn't choose bodybuilding, I would have gone down a very dark, harmful path. I mean, the bullying was very, very detrimental to my mental health. And I didn't have great people around me at that time either. Luckily, I had my parents. My parents pretty much kept my head on straight, but it would have been a dark path. And I know that. And so when I say bodybuilding saved me, I mean it kept me from destructing myself, because I know I have a powerful mind and I know that's my greatest weapon. So I would hate to see what would have happened if I had used it against myself. Instead, I got to make it work for myself. And so like I do, so bodybuilding, I mean, like that gave me a focus of betterment and I got lessons from it. Competing is different. And I can definitely say there were 2 times that I did a competition as a crutch to keep me moving forward out of a difficult time, because I knew that was at least going to keep me moving one foot in front of the other instead of regressing or getting stuck. One of those times it worked out great. I ended up winning. And then the other time I ended up getting like the worst placement I ever had as a pro. And I'm not mad about it. I know why I showed up that way on stage, but in the course of things, it was still important that I did that. Now, we talk about like imbalance with competing, and it's an extreme imbalance. Nothing can be in balance when you're competing. And there's a dedicated time and a phase for that. But if someone avoids life and competes to avoid addressing those things, I can recognize that. And I I can't sit here and say the way someone should or shouldn't do something, because I can understand all sides of it. But that's the question that I ask myself. If I'm doing something a certain way, I'm like, this is temporarily out of balance. Is this going to have a long-term effect? What's the damage? There's always damage when something's out of balance. And can I recover from it? But like, I do see people who never recover between shows, either like mentally or physically or emotionally, or even in their lifestyle habits or their responsibilities. Like, if you're just accruing so much debt financially because you can't stop competing, that's going to catch up with you. You know, like, yeah, this is expensive, but if you're avoiding dealing with your partner because you feel like you're in a safe zone when you're competing because you can blame everything on competing, that's not, to me, I don't consider that healthy. You need to address these things. You need to own up to your responsibilities. And so that's something that's a struggle for me. Even when I do my best to keep balance year round, but that's impossible. And so like, there are priorities that I keep in place that I'll never sacrifice, but then there's a lot of things that I will sacrifice, but also know that those are things that I'm going to have to deal with when this phase is over. No exceptions.
So this is what I think sometimes, that there's a deferment of whatever the problem is. And you might think like bodybuilding is your therapy and you're working through it. But I mean, I'm realizing this too. Like when I got into it, you know, I was going through a divorce. I didn't feel good about myself. You know, I didn't feel strong. And I literally would tell people, like, I wanted to look strong on the outside because I did not feel strong on the inside.
Yes.
And I would never trade everything that I've learned and I'm learning, and the relationships that I've gotten over the years. And even just like, you know, in the beginning of 2010-ish, like it wasn't a welcome thing. Like, you ended up getting bullied on social media and that type of thing for years. Like, that happened for the first 3 or 4 years.
Right.
So like, and I wouldn't change that either, because again, that's more of the growth and all. But like, then going through this, there's also the outro phase of, okay, so I'm not working towards getting on stage anymore. Because this is what I was going to ask you. Like, there's a huge difference between bodybuilding and competing. So finding where you fit in, and then realizing like, okay, maybe I was aggressively working through these feelings and I still have things that I need to work through. Thus, therapy that the gym doesn't solve, even though I've learned so much from the sport that has helped me grow and mature. And it's almost like you become this stronger person, and now you can go, I'm going to dig really deep and deal with this shit that I went through that I did. Like,
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, this is all genders, not just women, but like, most bodybuilders that I've met are people who have felt less at some point in their life. They felt weak, or they felt insignificant, or they've had some type of like just hard things to deal with, like abuse, or, you know, in a position where we felt like we weren't enough. That's most of the bodybuilders that I come across, not all of them, but so many of them have been bullied for one reason or another, or just in a phase where you feel like you said, it's like you want to feel stronger in some way. So like, there's a lot of projection in this sport, but at the end of the day, we all have experienced a feeling of weakness, or we wouldn't have done this. And when you look at it competing, it's like you find your weak points and you fix them. But with bodybuilding, it's like, what are your actual weak points? Are they just, I don't know, tools that you want to be equipped with on a communicative level, or an interpersonal level, or like your inner voice? My battle is within my head. It is right here. And I fight it still. I use my anger, and I'm really glad that I've learned how to use my anger in a constructive way. I still get mad. I still get upset, but I deal with it in the gym, and I might vent to Derek, but it doesn't go outside that. So like that's something that I'm really glad to have as an outlet. But like men and women, it's almost like that feeling of you felt weak and now you want to become a monster. And I encourage that. I like that. I like when people start to bring out that monster, as long as it's not harmful to themselves or someone else.
Well, like Jordan Peterson says, I don't know if you ever listened to Jordan B. Peterson. He's like a psychotherapist or whatever, but he says, you know, you become a monster, but then you learn how to control it. And I think
right.
That's where we want to be, because we have this, it might be anger or whatever trauma has happened to us.
Or fears of things or loss. Yeah.
Yes, all those things. And then you know, we all go to the gym, and then almost like an explosion happens where you're just like, oh, there's all these other elements that, and like I said, I've said this a million times, once you find that strength here, it does bleed out into all these other aspects of your life. And just like you want to learn more about the sport and get better and figure out your flaws and fix them, you start doing that in all other aspects of your life. Like there's containing it.
Yeah, it's just like you're learning how to practice that formula on different variables of your life. Yeah. So that's what I mean, like with bodybuilding, I'm not done learning yet. That's why I'm still doing it. But the way that it teaches me things, it's a gain because I can keep that as a practice and then do that elsewhere. So it does better me as a person, the person that I want to become. It's not about bodybuilding. That's what the surface is. But deep down, for me, it's recognizing my own potential as a human, and then getting there, and then practicing the creationist mindset of like manifestation. Like that's what it is for me. And when I'm done doing it with bodybuilding, I'll do it with something else.
Yeah, because you get familiar with one area when you feel comfortable at that level, and now you're like, now let's move on to, you know, what's the next thing where I can add this. It snowballs. And this is why I just think even people who get involved in this type of sport, even young, it just sets you up for a strong, successful mind and body for, you know, finances, relationships, you know, parenting, whatever it is. Yeah. Oh, that was so cool. Like that was your brain is beautiful. Like I just love
Thank you for saying that. It's weird in here sometimes, but I like it.
I love your thought processes. It's like, oh, it's really good. Well, let's talk a little bit about this posing program that you have created, where the need came about, what all, go ahead and just like a little bit present like what the birth of this and the use and where you think it's going.
I think when I first figured out that, or where I first came up with the idea of it, first of all, I'm not the first person to make a posing course. The reason I wanted to make my own was because I started to recognize that when I was doing like a lot of individual posing with people, it's almost like I was repeating the exact same thing at the first 3 sessions of everyone's sessions. And I was like, I started to look at this from their perspective, and I'm like, man, they're paying me a lot of money to say the basics. And if they had the basics in advance, then we can get into the layered stuff later. And so it used to take me like 6 to 8 sessions at least just to teach someone everything that I know about posing. And so I feel for the expenses of the sport. I know it gets expensive, and it's like I want people to invest in their posing. And so I just looked at it like a prerequisite. Like when you go to college and they're like, you need to have this level of understanding, or you need to read these books first. That's always like, okay, I'm going to come out with a prerequisite for posing sessions to save them the time and money and cost of everything in the long run, because I really enjoy taking people's posing and advancing it. But I couldn't get to that point yet because, of course, they've already spent all their time and money. And then the other problem was my schedule was getting too full. And I was like, I don't want to not be able to help as many people. So I was like, if I can start them with the course, then I have more availability to work with a lot of people. So it was almost like a time issue, but really it was, so there's my experience. Like I have 20 years of experience, and I don't know how else to teach that. I don't know how else I would be able to teach that. And I've always wanted to. And so this isn't just a posing course. It's like a one place where I can start to dump all of my knowledge and lessons. And that's why it's an ever growing product. It's not the same course now that it was when we first started it. Because I've been able to contribute more and more. And I think of new things, and I listen to the questions that I'm getting, and I try to meet the demand there. There's a lot of reasons that I wanted to make the course in the first place was, I've been going to posing clinics since 2013. And I would look around the room and I'm like, okay, there's 20 to 50 people here. How many times do these judges have to travel all over the country every weekend, say the same thing every weekend to 20 or 50 people at a time? And I'm not a judge. I have test judging experience, but it's my way of doing my best to interpret what the judges are saying and make it digestible for a broader audience, because that's why these judges and officials are putting these on in the first place. They want to get this knowledge out. Some people can't physically attend. So if there's a way that I can take, and I want to make sure that my information is accurate. So I try not to divert from what the judges are saying. In fact, like I'll do live Q&A sessions with my posing course members once a month. And sometimes I'll just pull up a screenshot of what a judge typed, because I don't want to misconstrue that in any way, but I can take that and then do a deeper dive into the point of it and make it understandable to more people. But there's a lot of reasons to do that too, because people, I help teach these posing clinics, and it's tough because we'll start to get a high volume of people, but a lot of people were walking into the posing clinics wanting to learn how to pose, and we just don't have the capacity to individually teach people their poses. So I was like, if I can create this posing course, now they've learned the poses, and now they can bring the poses to the clinics and ask the judges, hey, is this variation better for me? Or should I do this adjustment? Should I activate this? Because they already know what to bring. And it was hard because like some people would leave the posing clinics with more questions than answers. And my goal with the posing course is to give them the prerequisites so that they can go to the clinics and get more answers than questions by asking the right questions when they're there. So it's kind of like, if I'm trying to make an impact on this sport, I kind of want to bridge the gap, not just in technology, but in the, just bridge the gap between what judges are trying to get across to competitors, and like we were talking about earlier, creating a resource that competitors can come to and trust that. And so that's why I don't just teach posing clinics, I attend them. Like I just went to the women's workshop and I got DJ for it. But that was my way of listening to what Sandy and Becky had to say, and just make notes and make sure that my course is up to date with what they are saying. If there's a change in the industry, I make it within the course. If there's something that's unclear for my course members, I create a module or some content to help them better understand it. But then the other side of this too is like, we were talking about performance earlier, and people watch the Olympia, people watch the Arnold because it's high performance, right? It's entertainment. So if I were a show promoter, I would want a lot of people to buy tickets to my show, right? So wouldn't it benefit me if the people who are the entertainment could perform in a way that captivates the audience and makes them want to buy a ticket? So I would love for it to be a tool for promoters to help give to, or like, pass along to, people who are going to participate in their event, because sometimes I worry about the future of our sport and the ticket sales. You know, if money isn't circulating within the sport, then eventually competitors might not have that opportunity to compete. And so to keep our sport alive, I think the performance does need to step up to that next level so that people want to come watch the shows. They want to come support. They want to buy tickets. Promoters are making more money so they can put on more shows so that more athletes can have opportunities to display their performance. Like, it's full circle. So, but it's funny because, like, I think it was during COVID and our gym shut down, and I had just recorded a few modules for my prep clients. And I was like, I need to teach them how to pose because now I can't go teach posing classes. So we recorded these videos back in 2020. And I think it was 2021. Derek and I sat in the backyard at our little back patio table. And we were like, look, these don't look very polished, but they're valuable. They're educational. And if people just want the knowledge, we have the material right here, but it didn't look fancy. It didn't look like, I don't know, like aesthetically pleasing. I'm like, who cares? People want to learn. If they want to learn, they can look past the fact that I'm recording it on my phone because they want to hear what I have to teach. And we both looked at each other and we were like, is this smart to create a course, or are we jumping too far ahead? And we both just looked at each other. We were just like, screw it. Let's just see what happens. If the product fails, it fails. And we could try again later. But what if we do this and it's awesome? And we said that it was like Memorial Day weekend, 2021. And over the last almost 2 years, we've grown up to over 400 members. So 400 people have at least put their trust into this. And I love it because now, just this past year, I've started doing those monthly live meetings with my course members. And it helps me stay connected with them because it's hard for me to remember the beginning. And now I can look at this from a perspective of someone who's never seen a stage, touched a stage. It's like, how am I going to prepare this person who's never even done this before? And when they get it on stage, make them feel like they've been here. And so it challenges me to make sure that I'm using verbiage that they can understand or examples that they can understand and give a lot of visual tools. But it took me 11 national shows to turn pro. And I'd say a lot of times that had to do with my posing. So I know what it feels like to be on a national stage, hitting that ceiling right before, and you're like, I just can't get my lats to open. You know, like, I know that pain. So if I can help someone get their pro card because I can break it down in a better way, or a way that they can at least, it sinks in with them, I want to do that. And that's what's really cool is, like, last year we had 6 people turn pro with the posing course. And I want to make that number higher. And so it's like, I'm so glad that we took the risk and just said, let's just put it out there and we'll build it as we go. Because now it almost feels like a posing community because we're able to connect people through these live Q&As. It's like, I get to know the members better, but they get to know each other too. And they start following each other and asking awesome questions and sharing their experience. So sometimes I'll have someone who's competed for several years on the call, and then someone who's very new gets to hear the concerns that they have. And they're like, oh, how would I know to ask that question? And so part of the live Q&A, I just made a post about this a few weeks ago. It's like, I want to teach people how to ask questions and how to ask the right questions that are going to get them there faster, but also just have confidence in asking their questions. Because I used to feel stupid for that. I wouldn't ask the question because I'm like, that's a dumb question and someone's going to laugh at me. And so I try to create a safe place where no question is too small or dumb. And then when they get confident asking these questions on the live Q&As with me and these other course members, hopefully they feel more comfortable asking their coach or a judge. So that's, yeah, when I look at the end of like what my mission is in bodybuilding, it's not to withhold information, it's to give back. And I feel like people who have invested in me and taught me lessons, it's my duty to pass that on. That's why it's like, that's how I view the universe anyway. It's like, if it gives me something great, that's, it's like a favor. And it's like, I have to pass that on. And so that's why life hands me great things so I can give it to other people. It's
Yeah.
just, we happen to create this platform ourselves out of necessity, but also just, when I'm done competing, there's a whole lot of other stuff I'll dump in there 20 years from now.
I love that too, that it's becoming a community and it's interactive. I know you had, and you do different webinars and stuff too, covering amazing topics, just like things that people don't think about for show day, covering all this stuff about competing. So like you said, you don't know where somebody is coming from, and it's like getting everybody all up to speed so that they can get more out of their coaching, they can get more out of one-on-one posing. I mean, honestly, like you said, you're eliminating the first 3 or 4 posing sessions, so now we can really make it yours. Like, what is your stage time going to look like? That's so, and it's not even just about the posing, like you're covering so many other aspects of just competing in general.
Well, that's what I want people to, I look at, it's from my years of being in stage productions and like stage expediting. So with my experience with that, I've always looked at bodybuilding competitions as a business. And if the competitors are the customers, we want the customers to be happy, right? We want them to have a good experience so that they want to do it again. And so if I can make someone's show day experience awesome because they felt really comfortable and confident, and that they had a good experience, confident, that is important to me because I want people to love this as much as I do. And if I had a really bad experience because I was unprepared or I was just not given the same information that someone else had, I would probably feel frustrated with that. But then it makes everyone's job easier. So like I said, I've test judged a few times, but judges' jobs are already so hard. You're already comparing like apples to oranges to bananas. And so if I can get everybody in the same pose technique, it makes the judges' jobs easier. And that's important because as competitors, we want judges to assess us fairly and thoroughly. Now, if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do for that judge, I can't be upset if they couldn't judge me fairly or thoroughly. So the times where I got feedback where they said, maybe you need to grow your back, but you also weren't hitting your pose, that's on me, not them. I just made their job harder. So it is meant to make someone have the ultimate best experience that they can have so that they can progress faster in the sport. And I like to raise the standard of the sport. The sport should constantly be getting harder, and the bodies are getting so impressive. The posing should be too.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I never thought about it like that, where you said it does make the judge's job more difficult. So in 2015, I tore my rotator cuff and I knew I was going to get surgery and be out. I did it in 2014, but I knew I was going to be out. So I test judged the first couple of shows and I ended up judging for 2015 here in Michigan. And it was such
you know what it feels like to sit in that seat. It's stressful.
It is. And it's so, and you don't have a lot of time to assess, I mean, head judge would be like, here's your 25 bikini competitors, give me your top 5, hand in your slip, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you only have a little bit of time to assess what the criteria is. So when you're given this criteria, and I keep doing this because I feel like it's like a circle. And so you're like, you want to have posing, you want to have the correct level of leanness, you want to have your symmetry, you want to have your your suit and your heels and your hair and your makeup and your presentation, and it's all this thing. So now if you're somebody who didn't put time into posing, you didn't put time into hair and makeup, now you're outside of this circle. And now, but it's like, okay, but maybe your physique looks great, so they want to pull you back in, but you're missing these. It's like, how do you judge that? That's what makes it so hard.
It's super hard. And like, it's a struggle too, because you're like, this is about my physique. Why should it be a beauty pageant? But it is. I mean, at the end of the day, Gary Udit says this best. He says, make it easy for us to pick you as the winner. And when you have a high quality competition, you've got 5 winners. How do you choose one?
Yeah.
And it's going to come down to those little things.
Yeah.
And that's why I take such pride and put so much effort into my posing, because I know one day that's going to be the determining factor. Can I hit and hold my poses for long lengths of time? And can I beat someone out from posing? Because you've only got your genetics to work with. You can make the perfect package, but if you slip up on posing or your aesthetics, you are giving someone else and the edge, pretty much. You're handing it to them. Yeah. Why wouldn't you control those factors if you're getting up to that level? And so it just baffles me when people choose not to put effort into those details, because it's, when you look, you just said it perfectly. It's like we have a matter of seconds to give an impression, and the judges are looking for a certain look. And I love creative expression on stage in different forms, but if you notice, probably outside of my hair, I'm pretty traditional, because I want to send the signal that I look like a figure competitor. Yeah. So I don't do a lot of crazy things with my suit, my jewelry. My colors are super specific for a reason. My posing is simple for a reason, because I want to make it easy for the judge to look at my body. And I have to be careful because I'm a small person. I'm 5'2", and I don't know what I weigh right now, but when I'm on stage, I'm still probably like 125, 130-ish. I'm a slight, petite body. And if I don't fill out perfectly, if I don't pump up perfectly, if I don't send figure signals, I might accidentally look like a bikini competitor. And on that day, that's not my goal. So that's part of my way of making the judge's job easier, because I want to win. Yeah. So that's why I create all these signals and like movement, and like, you think about the message that you're sending, like body language is so strong. We use it every day to assess. So you are using your body language on stage to tell the judge what you're intending to deliver. And so it's not just like, the posing course isn't just teaching the poses and the footwork and the transitions and the walking. It's like, what are you doing with your face? What are you doing with your head? What are you doing with your hands? What are you thinking that's exuding outward? And like, that's what I mean. There's so much that I've learned and that I know. There's no way that I could teach I could teach posing to the same person every week for a year, and I still wouldn't be able to teach them everything. So that's why I don't know what this course is going to look like in 5 years, but it's going to be robust.
Well, I want to share a quick story that reminds me of how I know how posing is so important. Okay. Because when my first show, I did well. So here's the thing. I got involved in this sport about the same time I started getting into posing as when I started doing the sport, because I love. Did you do women's physique? Pardon? Yes.
Did you do women's? That's what I thought.
Yeah. And I loved watching the old like men like Sean Ray and Kevin Levrone, and watching them doing their posing on YouTube. And I was just like, this is beautiful. I love this sport. And then kind of, Dana Lynn Bailey came along, and I thought, oh, women's physique, because I'm not a women's bodybuilder. And so like, here's where I fit in. So I remember my second show, I went to talk to one of the judges afterwards, and he said to me, when you first walked out, you didn't look like much. And then you started posing and it all came. So it was like, it's the difference between almost like, people will be like, oh, you lift, and then you flex for them. And they're like, oh, you do, like, it's that type of thing. So shocking people. I mean, too, you've seen people on stage where it's like, it all comes together when they hit the pose. You're like, that's it. That's so beautiful, and you wouldn't have seen it if it was 2 seconds prior to that. And that's the difference between nailing it and missing it on the stage. And
the same can be said for the opposite extreme too, because I've always looked backstage. I'm like, God, that girl's huge. She's vascular. She's just so lean. And then I follow up with them like, I wonder if she can pose, because the people that I used to be scared of backstage, when we got on stage and I saw the video, I'm like, oh, they can't pose. And then I see that and I use that. I use it like a weapon. And I'm like, I'll outpose you. I might be smaller, I might not be as lean, but I will outpose you because it's fun. It's fun for me. But I could, half of the time I could bank on someone that I thought was going to beat me, just not knowing what to do or not being able to focus. But then the people who did beat me obviously looked better than me and they could pose.
Yeah. So what would you say? I mean, like I said, I always thought it goes hand in hand, just because it was kind of what I got almost not first, but posing came right along with, like, we had a room in our gym and I would play those YouTube videos and I would just practice posing for, 10 minutes or so, even to the point where, because yeah, I did women's physique. If a song came on I'd be like,
Oh,
this would be a great posing song.
I do that now. I'm like, and it's so hard because especially in season, I'm like trying to focus on figure and I'll hear a song. I'm like, I want to do women's physique posing to this. This sounds fun. And I'll just stop what I'm doing. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, probably should have put that 10 minutes somewhere else in my day. But it's just, it like strikes you.
One of the things I wanted to mention that I think kind of goes with a lot of the categories is that people do need to kind of slow down. And what made me think of it, I was like, oh, I know this exactly. You had posted a video, a reel of you posing, and you're like, this isn't even the song that I was posing to. Because when you know how to pose and transition, you can pretty much put any song to it and it finds its groove, and it just
Yes.
look, because the flow is there, just like the flow of music is there. So
Yeah.
it just works. It's such an art form. It's so beautiful. But what I was going to ask you is, so do you think that when the seed is planted and somebody's like, oh, I'm getting into the sport, I think I'm going to compete, it's time to start looking into learning how to pose, is it not? Yeah.
I say if you think you should start posing, you should have started yesterday. Like people have maybe just not, maybe they're not prepared or informed of how hard posing is. And you would be shocked how many people I get for individual posing and they go, well, my coach told me not to start posing until like closer to show. And I think, why is it, from a coach's perspective, I need my clients to know how to pose or I can't make an accurate assessment. So until they get their poses down, it's extra hard for me to say, well, did we actually make progress? I'm thinking, why would your coach tell you to wait anyway? I do not understand that philosophy. So I don't want to say it's wrong, but I completely disagree. I think your posing this is a fact. Your posing is a different type of muscular stimulus. People who get really detailed, I promise they're practicing their posing to death. I mean, look at our top classic physique competitors and women's physique competitors. They're constantly posing. That stimulates your muscle fibers in a different way. You get different contractions, you get different details. And it's not the same as lifting weights or running sprints. It's just different. It like hardens your physique. It's another method of training, not just your muscles, but your nervous system. Like I have to explain to people all the time, posing takes time to get down neurologically. So it takes you 2 or 3 weeks to get your motor neurons to fire in a specific way and know how to own a movement in the gym. Posing is no different. And if you don't make those commitments, you go to the gym, like 4 to 6 times a week, probably. Posing once a month isn't going to cut it. And that was another reason that I wanted the posing course to be accessible like all the time, because I want people to want to pose in their off season well before a show. And the number one reason is to reduce stress. Think of all the stuff we have to do in the last 2 months before a show. And now you're going to start learning how to pose.
Yeah. And you see these people, like when you see pros on stage and they're going through and they're like, nope, quarter turns, switch them, do it again. The endurance and the stamina that it takes to do that, like, the people who are shaking, the people who are sweating have not been practicing for that moment.
Well, I'm always so grateful when someone that we connect, and instantly, if someone is panicked, my brain is like, I need to undo the panic. And I have had people come to me 2 or 3 weeks out and they're like, I don't know how to pose. And so that's where the course has been a lifesaver, because I can give that to them, because they can work through it on their own time, but I can give them actual assignments and say like, okay, I know my schedule, we can only meet 2 times for individual sessions before your show, but you can work through this. So whatever, however good you want to be in that amount of time. One of the people who turned pro last year used the course for 3 weeks. That's my like favorite story to tell. And that's right before they got their pro card. And I'm so glad that they've connected, because it's like, it's a crash course. But again, if I can prevent that from being an afterthought and be a forethought, those 3 weeks could have just been coasting and easy and relaxing and feeling just ultra prepared and ultra confident. And like, it's just one less thing to worry about at the end when we're already brain fried because we're depleted. So yeah, posing frequently, posing often, and not just, I mean, you can't own it until you learn how to do it. But then there's other layers to that. Like, can you do it and breathe? Can you do it and tune out? Can you, like you said, like go on repeat over and over again? And so that's how I like to challenge people's posing, because it's once they learn it, then I'm like, okay, let me throw this at you and see if you can handle that. And then by the time, my favorite is like, you get a novice competitor, they don't know how much they know. But it's almost like when I can see them on stage posing for the first time, and then they're like, oh my God, I know more than these people. That confidence just beams out of them. That's cool. That's so cool to watch.
I think I always think of that. People say practice makes perfect, and it's perfect practice makes perfect. So I love that you're providing a standard, because I mean, we talked about just before going on here about how people will look at movements, try to copy movements, maybe from like YouTube videos or whatever it is, where there's not instruction. And it just, that's how it comes across. It's like they're doing the movement, but they don't really know what they're doing. In the same way that, you know, you would exercise in the gym or whatever, you know, before you actually know that an RDL is a hip hinge, it's not just touching your toes with weights, you know? So yeah. So I just love that. So you break down all of every category, every pose, like this is what your front pose, this is what quarter turns, this is what your back pose is supposed to look like. So the base is there for people to just take it all in and learn on their own to start.
Yes. And I like that. I actually want it to be a way for them to like, not just like I do individual posing sessions, but ideally this course can work with any posing coach, because I do have my own philosophies, but they all should be congruent, because if all posing coaches are getting the information from the judges, then it should all be the same. The verbiage might be different, the breakdown might be different, and each person has individual needs. But like even with the posing course, it's like if someone just took that as a base, then if they chose to work with a completely different posing coach, they might use different verbiage, but it should still help that person and that posing coach be able to advance faster. So like I don't even want it to be a thing to like take away from other posing coach. I hope it's an assist for everybody, but at the same time, each posing coach has a different philosophy, and none of them are right or wrong. They're just different. And so the course is to provide a super basic breakdown in a way I try to do it from literally different camera angles and just different angles in my methods of teaching. Because I realize like I'm a visual learner. I need to see it or I don't get it. But I also have to see it, apply it, and then go back and see it again. Like that's how I learned. It's like a sandwich. So that was the design of it, was like, it's rare that someone gets it on the first time. And I would rather my clients in an individual session be able to focus on what we're doing in those 30-minute sessions than having to stop and write down notes. So if I see someone writing down notes, I'm like, hey, you might want to consider the course, because then you can take notes at a different time and you're getting more out of your session with your posing coach. So there's a lot of reasons to use it, but I just really recognize that people learn differently. And I've got a lot of people who are on like different shifts and all over the world. So if I'm working with someone in Japan, it's really hard to match schedules. Yeah. And that way, if they can use the course, it's like when we can match up, cool. But then in the meantime, they don't have to wait on me to be able to start learning, or their posing coach to start learning. And people who work like a lot of nurses, like they're on a completely different time schedule. And so if they can work on the course in their waking hours or like during their cardio, that just saves everybody trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the more it grows and the longer that I go with it, I'm like, I get excited because I'm like, man, what can I do with this next? But it's so rewarding to hear the feedback from the course members, because at the end of the day, this is for them. And it's like, I want to make it so good that they don't have critique on how to make it better. But then if they do, that gives me an idea of like, hey, this is something I need to address in a webinar or our live Q&As, or I need to create something. So I just like the challenge.
I just love that too, that it is becoming a community where people can ask questions. Those are always I've done this with like the J3 University as well, where they do Q&A times. And this is just a time to connect with you as the creator and ask questions and get feedback. And, it might be just completely different, but also an asset to, whoever they're working with as a coach or whatever too. So I just love that you're like, I'm here to help make things easier for your coach client relationship also. And just, it's absolutely incredible. I'm excited to be a part of it and, participate in the next Q&A and everything. So, so great. So
thank you.
What you have going on right now is it's a one-time purchase and you have access. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, that's kind of changed too. Like in the beginning, we thought we were going to use like a yearly subscription kind of thing, but I want people to have the ability to access it whenever, because I want people to just get better at their posing whenever. And so that's why we made it like lifetime access, because like I want people to definitely use it before a show, but I also want them to come back to it like in their improvement season, because as your body changes, your posing can change too. And sometimes we just need refreshers. And so that's why I made it like lifetime access, was because I want people to want to stay involved even in the live Q&A stuff. Like it's cool because I can see who's on these calls and I'm like, oh, they competed a year ago and they're on this call. That's what I want, because the sport keeps evolving. And I will tell you, like, this is tough because the sport is so fast paced in its growth all around, that if someone takes a break from stage, like 2 years or 10 years, they might think that they're up to speed. And when they get up on their own show day, they find out in a hard way that they're not. Yeah. So if my course stays up to par with the standards of the sport, then they don't feel like they took 10 years off.
Yeah.
That literally just happened to somebody. They're like, I did figure 10 years ago, and they're getting back on stage. I'm like, here's what's different. Here's what people are. Here are the expectations now. Here's what you can expect from the judge. Here's what they want to see. And then that way they don't feel like it'd be like wearing an outdated suit. Like you can tell the outdated suit.
So, or you can just tell people who like, oh, I competed in the 80s. And now you're like, oh yeah, I know.
There's so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think just how much shows have evolved. I love hearing the story. Gary tells the story of like back, I guess it was the 80s, where a bodybuilding show was like a gymnasium, and they'd hang a light bulb from a basketball goal and they had a blank sheet behind it. That was a bodybuilding show. And now you've got these crazy, like, oh my God, I can't wait. Someday I want to go to one of these shows in person, but like the Chris Mins and is it Center Podium? They do the Motherload show. And it's like a almost circus type, like steampunk kind of vibe, like a rave circus thing for the costuming and everything. I'm like, that's cool. Like that's a whole different expression of bodybuilding shows. And just the way that promoters are taking care of athletes now, like looking at from the show structure, like this happened in COVID, but they've stuck with it, where they're doing more shows where it's prejudging in the morning, and then as soon as they're done with prejudging, going straight into finals. Like that's way better for everybody. And so like it's cool to see how the productions of the shows have adapted. But like we've got a lot of nice bright LED lights. We've got some insanely talented photographers and videographers, where the footage of your show now is like unbelievably worth the money, considering people used to have to take pictures with like a little Kodak camera to get a documentation of what they looked like. It's like, how cool that we have these types of technologies now to make a whole, not just a smooth experience, but when you look back on it, you're like, wow, I can be back in that moment again.
Yeah. Yeah. It made me think of something that I know that Brooke and I were trying to cover, like before you compete type stuff. And I was just thinking, what an important element. I don't know how many people do this, but I always think you should schedule a photo shoot like after, like another, it's just another element to capture the work that you did, but it's
Yes.
stage. Like, so if you haven't scheduled a photo shoot for the weekend that you compete, like you're gonna hate yourself for that because it's like
I can speak for that. Like, I've been frustrated at times where, like, I didn't do any photo shoots around the Olympia. Turns out it was probably best that I didn't. But that was my best form ever, and I've got some selfies to show for it. But I know there's going to be more Olympias, and I just, like, part of me is like, oh, I wish I would have done that. But, like, at the same time, I don't know how other people feel about this. Photo shoots for me are exhausting.
yeah.
And not just the shoot itself. Like, even if the shoot is short, it's like, oh my God, I have to think of outfits. I have to do my makeup, my hair. And it's just like, modeling for me has always been a job. And I'm like, do I really want to work on the weekend that I'm competing? And so it's tough sometimes, but then, like, a really great photographer can capture those things with lower efforts, or, like, I guess too, it matters like who I'm shooting with.
You should do like you should do a webinar and just be like, this is what you need, concise, for a photo shoot. And you could probably even recommend like some of the popular photographers to work with who are normally
Actually,
at the shows, you know?
I used to do that before the posing course idea. I used to teach a modeling, like, posing class.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like bodybuilding poses, but it was like stuff that people would use for like Instagram or photo shoots. And I did all that in like the pack list, and like
Yeah.
add some just red flags to watch for. This is actually something I keep intending to record in general for people in this sport, to just the red flags
Oh
and
yeah.
how to protect themselves and stand up for themselves. And so, like, that's something I do want to do, but it can be tough with photography. I don't know why that area, but I hear of a lot of poor experiences, and it's important to me that people don't run into that position. And so that's something I want to do eventually too. Not I mostly for women, but not just women. I mean, I want to be open to all these situations happening to anybody, but just things to be mindful of and watch out for, and to be prepared and how to handle those situations. That's something I do want to add to the course at some point.
That would be a good podcast. It kind of
I know somebody who does really good podcasts, Deborah.
You're so funny. We could get like a group of girls to talk about that, though. I think it would be,
I think that'd be awesome.
yeah, because we've all had, I mean, I know I personally have had sort of, it just was like, oh, I didn't know that this was going to go, like I didn't do any questionable photos, but I didn't know it was going to go on somebody's website
Oh yeah,
for their
people down for stupid stuff. Like, they use me for their suit website, and they didn't design the suit, and I've never had business with them.
Yeah.
I've had to like go to people, and I'm like, you have no permission to use this image whatsoever. Then it's like, you can only do so much. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a photo that you wish you didn't take. It's just the communication and expectations weren't clear or discussed at all.
Well, even like even Instagram photos, there was a page for the longest time that was, it was something girls, something like muscle girls or something. They stole hundreds of thousands of photos and had a whole site that I ended up finding it because if you click on it, then they'd send out a computer virus with a number that you had to call, and then it was like a whole scam.
Holding you ransom.
What? Oh my gosh. But it was all based off of like muscle girls. It was all
this is the real podcast.
it was all based off of stolen photos. And I ended up messaging them and I'm just like, you don't have my permission to make money off my Instagram photos. Like, yeah. And they ended up taking mine down, but the site was still up. So like, it was just crazy. People just, some guy or many, just, I mean, every person that you know off Instagram who is in like the fitness field, in that space, their photos would be on this website instead of, it was like,
Derek Adam.
yeah.
Anything on anybody and shut it down.
So crazy. I was going to ask you something else. Oh, well, I wanted to talk, but a podcast about like photographers would be great. And also about, I think we've kind of talked about it before, but I always think coaching red flags is good too, because people are always like trying to figure out who a good coach is. And I always like know high level coaches. So I'm like, well, you're going to be paying $150 to $300 a month for this coaching from like a high level person. But then like people are looking for local, and I'm like, well, I don't know how to vet like your regular coach to know if they know what they're doing. Because if I haven't heard of them, I feel like they probably are not someone who is really affluent in the industry and might not be the best coach. I don't know. Like there's so many thoughts that go, into that. So that's interesting. But anyways, I was going to say, I wanted to touch a little bit on coaching, on coaching,
poaching coaches,
coaching coaches, on coaching, because, we had talked about briefly, and I won't say her name, but we have there was a woman that was in my gym who came to me for coaching. I wasn't taking on clients at the time. And I kind of like, you ended up being on the podcast. She was like, I really like her. I said, oh, reach out to her. And since she has been working with you, she has made leaps and bounds improvements in her physique, in her diet adherence, in her posing. And even like I saw her just about 2 weeks ago. I ran at her local supplement shop, and her confidence is like through the roof. So I want to talk about just what you can get from connecting with a coach when you're ready to connect with a coach, because I really feel like that's going to expedite your progress.
Definitely. And I'm a firm believer that if you don't match with your coach, then you might learn a lot, but at the end, you're probably not going to get out of it what you wanted. And there are so many awesome coaches. I do want to mention this because like, I'll actually send this to you if you want to pass it around, but I wrote an entire article of like how to choose a prep coach.
Nice.
So like, if you look at it like an interview process, like if you're applying for a job, it's like that, these are the things that the employer should be asking the employee pretty much, but like we don't translate it to choosing a coach very often. And I've also written articles on what your prep coach can and can't do. So I can write from both sides because I've been on both sides. I am a competitor and I am a coach. And if I'm trying to look at this objectively from a competitor standpoint, here are the things that I would want to know before I hired my coach. But then as a prep coach, these are things that I would want to say to a potential client to say, here's what you're walking into. So I have written 2 articles on that, and I send them to free people all the time because there's just part of me that, for reasons of integrity, and this breaks my heart to hear, but like sometimes I will get girls who are distressed and they'll reach out to me and they'll say, my coach hasn't answered me for weeks and my show is in a month. Yeah. And I can't help them if they are with that coach. Right. So what I like to do is try to mend the relationship between that person and their coach first. And I'll send them that article and I'm like, here, read this. And maybe it'll open up some perspective of how you can communicate with your coach better. Maybe there was a misunderstanding or just a miscommunication that happens all the time. So I try to help them repair that relationship with their coach first. And I do consultations with this all the time because I want that. I want clients to feel successful and for them to work it out with their coach, but sometimes it just doesn't work. But then that doesn't mean that I'm the best coach either. So I make them read this before I can give them any information, because I'm like, if you're going to leave your coach, here's what I think here's what you need to question with any coach relationship, me or anyone else. So I try to teach people how to do that with confidence, because I can't stand to hear these horror stories of people who have not just been costed in their finances, but their health and their emotional health, because they trusted this coach. And now maybe I always try to give people benefit of the doubt. Maybe the coach wasn't prepared for what they were taking on. Maybe maybe it's their first time coaching. Maybe they're actually just having a really tough time in their personal life, or maybe they're dealing with health issues. Like, there's always two sides to every story, but it's business.
Yeah.
And you're paying for a service. So I can see all sides around that. And that's what I just like to kind of make that expectation a little bit more fluid. But there are all kinds of coaches. And when I was first starting out, I wasn't a big name. And even I had my business for 10 years before I was I've had my business for 10 years before I've owned the confidence of saying, yeah, I'm a prep coach. I'd say for the first 5 years, I still hesitated when people asked what I did, because I felt like I was still paying my dues and I was still learning so much. And I had so much to learn that I almost felt like an imposter if I said I was a prep coach, because I was like, I'm still young in this. But my clients were happy. And if they weren't happy, they moved along. Or I learned some hard lessons that made me a better coach. And so big names don't impress me, because I've heard some big names who have dropped the ball. And I've heard I take it with a grain of salt. An upset competitor, of course, is going to express himself differently than someone who had a good experience. I always look at them in clusters, and I say, if I hear a repeat issue, this goes for opposing coaches too. I never knock another opposing coach, but when I hear the same thing from multiple previous clients, I acknowledge it. And I just kind of keep that in my head when I can say this about any role in this industry. Not all coaches are the same. Not all opposing coaches are the same. Not all pros are the same. You can have that title, but we're not all the same kind of people. And that's okay, as long as people are aware of that, because what I don't provide as a prep coach or opposing coach may not be necessary for someone. And that's fine. Or that might be a very strong need that they need fulfilled. And then I can say, well, then I'm not the coach for you. Let me refer you to someone who does provide that. And so I do like to kind of keep tabs of experience with coaches. There's one thing that I cannot ever accept, and it's the boundary of appropriateness. And so if I hear of one situation, that's all I need to hear. I don't care if it was misunderstood or false. I don't need to hear it twice. And so if I know something about someone that it's some lines of appropriateness have been crossed, that is something I will actively talk about as a forewarning, because I wouldn't want the chance to be there for that to happen again. But coaches make mistakes too. And I like to leave room for coaches to grow better. And so even if an upset client is telling me some things, I can still kind of narrow that down to the bare bones of like what's actually been said or done, and leave some room for interpretation there. But luckily there are so many great coaches now. It almost comes down to who do you mesh with on a personality level or a communicative level. So like some people need more communication than others, or like this was my struggle when I was looking for a prep coach 6 years ago. I had 3 people in mind and they were all awesome. And I was like, how am I going to narrow this down? And I started asking their clients. I'm like, hey, can you tell me your experience working with this coach? All of the clients said great things about their coaches. And I was like, that wasn't useful, because now I still don't have an answer. I can't narrow it down. So what I started to do is I reached out to those coaches, and I was like, maybe I'll just start with a training program from each of them, not for the training program, but to see how they do things, like how we would talk, how we would communicate. And it literally ended up coming down to, I ended up having to set up phone call, because all of them were like, yeah, we can do that. I'm like, well, somebody say something to give me a clear answer here. So I ended up talking to each of them, and they all said similar things. But it was almost like, I think I had talked with 2 of the 3 coaches, and I was like, if I don't talk to this third one, I'll always wonder. So I called Shane and I was like, hey, I just want to talk with you. Like, here's what I'm looking for. I'm not just looking to become a better competitor. I want to become a better prep coach. Like, I need a mentor. Can and will you do that? And he was very open to it. He was extremely humble, which I liked. And we were on the same page from our starting base and where we wanted to go. And our morals were the same. Our beliefs were the same. We were extremely congruent. And when I got off that third phone call, I was like, that's it. And I couldn't tell you why he's any different, but I knew he was the coach for me. And look at what we've done in 6 years.
Yes.
We've never gotten worse. We've been through some tough stuff, but we have only learned and gotten better. Our communication has only gotten better, and he's taught me things that I can assess my physique better with, so that we've both grown more, better, make better judgments together. And he believes in me in a way that I don't know if anybody else could. They could have been the greatest coach on paper, but the way that he forces me to believe in myself, I joke with him and I'm like, that's why I pay you to get this right, you know? Listen to some interviews of how Sydney talks about Damien, her coach.
Yeah.
It's that important. When you're trying to be your ultimate best, you need that person who is right for you. That's just it. It has to be a perfect match. And when it is a perfect match and the knowledge is there and the work ethic is there, that's when stuff like the magic happens. And so I don't knock people who need to try a few different coaches to figure out their best fit. I've had 3 coaches in my lifetime, and I've coached myself twice. It took me some time to get into this relationship, but I also don't, I just watch people when they jump coaches.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can you really, it's like any other relationship. You don't know the depths of that relationship until they're tested. And if you're willing to stay and work through it, that's when you get on the other side and reach the incredible stuff. But I see people who jump coaches for reasons that I wouldn't really, that maybe I don't understand as reason enough to skip that process. But something like an inappropriate act or certain, just a level of respect or certain business matters, that doesn't need a second try. It's like, you know the answer there. So it's just, it is interesting when you think about client coaching relationships and who's good and who's not. And so I know someone asked me this years ago. They were like, would you ever switch to a big name coach? And I'm like, only if that big name coach is the best person for me. Like, I don't care if they didn't have a name or not. I don't care how many people they've turned pro. Can they make me better when I'm at my worst? That's what I want. And that's what I try to do with my clients. It's not about the bodybuilding show. It's how much are we going to grow together? What can I teach you and what can you teach me? Because we're on a journey together. And it's an important chapter. Like, I don't look at this any differently than any other life event. Like if someone were getting married or they're switching careers or buying a house, it's like, I want this to be something that we can both look back and be really glad that we did it together. And that's why I love coaching. I'm not here to get you in shape. I'm here to be a part of your growth into a journey you've never been on. And you're taking me with you. Like, how lucky that you trust me. Thank you for trusting me, because I always learn something out of it. And I'm really grateful for my clients and the ones that I have now, and the fact that they do trust me. But the biggest joy that I get is seeing them become themselves. And I know who the person that we're talking about, it's like, I've just really enjoyed this process because it's been about a year and she's just now waking up to herself. And that's so exciting because I know she's going to go far. But it's like, I feel lucky that she came to me and that I could see that in her. And it took some time to like say, like, is this really what we want to focus on and do and commit to? And it's scary, of course, but it's like, she's owning it now. Like, how cool.
Yeah.
So I don't work with a lot of people on purpose because I want to be able to provide good quality service for my clients, but really I just want to have the capacity to be very involved with my clients.
Yeah.
I don't want to have so many clients that I can't be involved.
Well, and this is what we had talked about this a little bit previously about how it's not like my goal isn't to win over every person that applies with me. It's to make sure that we're a good match. And to take all those things into consideration. And you said this too. I might say, hey, I'm not a good fit for you because this is my scope. This is my level. I'll take people at this level, but not people on this level and not people on this.
Yeah.
And so there's this discernment that you have to have as a coach. Like I can't work with everybody because this is what I tell people all the time. I need you to fill out my assessment form so that I can know if I could even help you. I don't even know if I can help you. I need to know these things first. So you might think you're picking me, but I'm also picking you.
Yes. That's important. That's so important. And that gives you the ability to put your energy into what you're passionate about. You're always going to do a better job with something that you're passionate about. I know I'm not going to do a good job or something I'm burnt out with, so I don't take the job. I've put my art business on pause for almost a year and a half now because I got burnt out on art. I know I'm not going to do a good job, so I'm not taking orders right now. But when I'm passionate about it again, I will. And I used to personal train, and I used to go teach posing classes on site every week, and I just got really burnt out. And I would rather put that person in touch with someone else who is passionate about general fitness or lifestyle athletes. And on the other end, I'm trying to learn and grow as a prep coach, but there are just certain areas that even if I have it written down in a notebook, that doesn't mean that I have the experience. And if I'm even hesitant, I just did this with one of my clients who she's an awesome client and a great person. And we made it through like one competition, but then she started to have some health challenges pop up, and it got to a degree where I didn't want her to pay me anymore because I didn't feel like I could help her. So I told her, I was like, I would rather you put your money toward getting your labs done. And I referred her to a different prep coach who specializes in hormones. And I'm so glad that I did because they've made progress now. I would not be happy with myself if a year later we were in the same or a worse position and she paid me money. I don't want that. So if it's someone who it's like, I could do it, but I'm not going to give that person my absolute best. And I know that I'm not going to take their money. And I would rather help someone else grow their business who that's where they thrive, or, get them in touch with the right person, because it's not conducive for anyone's outcomes or energy or daily happiness if that's not a complete match.
Yes.
And that's tough sometimes because there is a outgrowth. So
and some people are in that phase too, where we had talked about, I love the people that are researching and learning and trying to grow on their own. And you may not have tapped out that potential, or maybe you just need the confidence to somebody who knows what they're doing to say, you're headed in the right direction. You just need to keep doing what you're doing. Like there's, because all you would be doing is, I think this sometimes too, all you would be doing is hearing that from me every week. And you're paying to do that. So you can still take, 6 more months on your own before we, to get you to a better spot where now we can start doing a little bit more damage, where you just are, sort of plateaued with what you've been able to do on your own and what you're learning. So
yeah,
it's like that phrase people don't use enough. Like, I don't know the answer. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid to just say, I can't help you here, or I don't need to help you here. I don't know, but I can find out, rather than thinking as a coach, I need to be able to work with everybody, know everything about everyone and have all the answers. And that's, I think when you narrow your scope and you limit your clients, you're just doing a better service, because it's quality instead of quantity that you're, helping on an individual basis.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So
it's tough sometimes.
It is tough. It's tough to be honest, because you do want to help everybody. So you figure out sometimes helping people it just looks different, you know?
Yeah. And that's why I always put myself in their position. I'm like, what would I want or expect? How would I want to be treated?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's important to acknowledge those things, but also like that's why I set up an initial consultation with people, because I straight up tell them, like, I want you to come to me. I want you to feel comfortable coming to me with your questions and concerns, and I want to be able to say the same. And I have had situations where we're on a good track, but then something just gets extremely out of balance, and I'm like, hey, if we're both doing our best and something isn't working, then we need to pause or take a step back or reconsider. And it's not always things that we can control. It's usually like a life circumstance. But I that's what we were talking about before this started. It's like I have a whole assessment from both ends that I want to occur before there's any exchange of money or commitment. Because I want them to, I'll tell them, like, here's what you can expect from me. Here's what I'm open to. Here's where I'm aiming to be better. But I also expect this from you. And then I tell them to sleep on it. Give it some thought. Don't rush into it. Think about it. If it feels right, let's go. If you have any hesitation, let's wait.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that because the most rewarding thing is, you know, when you are finished, I guess, with a client, when they kind of like they get their wings and they're like, I know, like my line is like what you had said. I'm always like, thank you for trusting me in this process. And I want to be able to say that, you know, like, you've learned so much. I've learned so much. Thank you for trusting me. And now you are able to, you know, progress on your own, or we did what we needed to do at this time, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to have that, like everyone won.
Yeah. And that's the goal, right? Like, you're not hiring a coach forever.
Right.
So I want to teach that person the most that I can in the amount of time that we've got, so that they feel comfortable and empowered to do it on their own. Or if they shift life gears, at least, like I said, it's like we can look back and say, hey, that was cool that we did that together. But ending a coach client relationship is so hard, but it can be done gracefully. And I'm always appreciative when it is graceful.
Yeah.
Because emotions come up, you know?
Well, and the beauty of that is, I know some of my best clients came from clients who had me before, because they'll refer.
Hey, that's cool.
You know what I mean? They know it's almost like they know, like, oh, this person's kind of like me. And so they're looking for a coach. And then I'll realize, like, oh, I can see why those people are friends, and they have certain traits.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Make them coachable or whatever. So I mean, I think that's how a good coaching business can grow. Is a lot of that is word of mouth. You know, you do up and they spread that word. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Autumn, you know what I think we should do, you know what would be great is if you sent me those articles, you could come back and we could talk about all these different aspects of coaching.
Yeah.
We could turn it into a podcast if you wouldn't mind turning it into
I think that was cool, because I want people to feel just educated, especially people who are new to the sport. It's like, what should you look for in a coach? But then, like, that is meant to be a tool, because especially for someone who's coming into this, it's like, how would they even know to question these things? So I think getting that information out there and discussing it like this would be great for a lot of people.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll set it up. But meanwhile, this was so chock full of great information. I appreciate your time. So
yeah, thank you for having me on again a second time. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I look forward to being a part of this posing community that you've created.
Yeah. Because you'd probably be able to contribute a lot too.
I hope so. I love asking questions, and your perspective on things is absolutely priceless. You've been doing this a long time. It's been an arduous struggle. You like literally been the poster child for bodybuilding. So
thank you.
Yeah, so it'll be great. So we'll have you on again. We'll talk about kind of what you would look for if choosing a coach and if you're coachable and what that looks like. And then I can report back how things have been going in the posing.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love that. Any feedback is always appreciated.
Be so great. So Autumn, if people if they want to get a hold of you, where is the best place to find you, and where can they find and purchase this posing course? And just go ahead and plug some of your best here.
Probably the best way to get in touch with me is through Instagram, to send me a message. That my Instagram name is Automatic, and everyone pronounces it differently, but it's AUTUMNATIKK. Or if they go to my website, which is autumncleveland.com, that's where they can find like posing session information and the posing course information. If they just want to go straight to the posing course and they go to my Instagram, it's in the link in the bio. So that's like the most direct way to get to it. But I also like to answer questions if people have questions about the course first. So if anybody's listening and they're thinking about it, do not hesitate to ask any questions so I can make sure it's a good fit for you first. But yeah, that's probably the most accessible way is Instagram for anything.
Okay, sounds good. And I'll link all those things in the show notes so that be easy access for people.
Yeah.
Find you. So I appreciate you and what you're doing and your passion for the sport and your passion for helping people. It's just wonderful.
Thank you. It feels nice. It feels good.
I love that. All right, guys, thanks for listening and watching to another episode of The Women's Fittest. You can find us on Instagram at The Women's Fittest. You can find me on Instagram at buffcake22. And you will find this video also on my YouTube at buffcake22 and wherever you listened to podcasts. Thanks again, Autumn, for your time. It's so appreciated. And as I always say, remember that healthy looks different on everybody.
I love that.
Love it.